What is going on? Welcome to another live stream here on the channel Manny Ramos Undisputed. Hope you're enjoying all the other videos, my regular videos, live stream videos. We're trying to put out as many videos as possible just to entertain you and or start a conversation, right? So not only that, we're going to be doing a little bit of gameplay. We have here a very interesting human being, Rizwan Virk. He's a author. He also is a pioneer of game development, video game development, and he knows a lot about future events, what's bound to happen, or this and that. First of all, how did he get on the Joe Rogan experience? That's the thing. Joe Rogan has so many guests on there. It's hard to keep track. Why am I so... I need to be a little bit less darker, right? Let me see. There we go. All right, is that better? Yeah. Yeah, so let's get into it. We have a little bit of Dr. Mario here, or Tetris or something, just to kind of chill out. If you have a question, comment, concern, leave it in the chat. Let's see what we can get into. Let's get going. All right. So he already kind of introduced them a little bit. Let me go ahead and reverse it a little bit. I'll go ahead and we'll put it right here.
That's my night, all day.
By the way, Diana Pasoka says hi.
Oh, cool. You know her?
Yeah, I know her pretty well, actually.
Boy, her theory is
Jet?
very, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
She's a strange person to talk to because you start really considering some of the things she's saying. It's just all the UFO stuff. I go back and forth on the UFO stuff, from it being complete bullshit to like maybe there's something there.
Right.
Like, I fluctuate throughout the day.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about that. You know, I'm peripherally involved with
Jamie, you making noise over there? Shut your mic off.
Yeah.
You're peripherally involved
with the Galileo Project at Harvard and the Soul Foundation at Stanford, which are like the two academic UFO research groups that are out there. You know, Avi Loeb is running the one at Harvard, and Gary Nolan is running that. You had Gary on your show, right?
I have not, but I'm
Okay.
in communication with him. I've talked to him quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'm very fascinated by his work.
I'm happy to talk about UFO stuff where it overlaps with simulation theory.
So how did you get involved in this whole theory in the first place? Explain to people your position, if you don't mind, on simulation theory. What do you think is going on?
Yeah, well, so first question, how did I get involved in this, right? So, you know, I was a video game developer in Silicon Valley, and then I became an investor in the video game industry. My background's in computer science. And what happened was, after I sold my last video game company back in 2016, so we're talking like, 7 years ago now, 8 years ago now, and I put on a virtual reality headset and started playing a VR ping pong game. All right, now these headsets were even bigger than they are now, and they were wired, so there's no mistaking you're in virtual reality. But what happened was that the ping pong game was so realistic that for a moment my brain forgot that this wasn't a real game of table tennis. So much so that I tried to put the paddle down on the table, and I tried to lean against the table. But of course there was no table, so the controller fell to the floor, and I almost fell over. I had to do one of these double taps.
That is funny because those virtual reality games, they're getting more and more real. It's amazing. It's amazing how real they're getting. And I don't really mess too much with them, but they're intriguing. They're expensive too. You can actually get like a VR video game at home, but man, you'll be paying thousands of dollars. They're talking about UFOs and stuff like that, so he's kind of just giving a way background on how he got into the whole aliens and UFOs and stuff like that. So right off the bat, I don't believe in aliens. So if you are getting ready to ask me that, I don't believe in that. How's the gym going? Is going. Getting all the logistics together.
Takes like, oh wait, I'm just in VR, right? So I started to think about how long would it take us to build something like the Matrix, something that's so immersive that you would forget right, that you were inside a video game. And so that led me to this idea of the simulation point, which is a kind of technological singularity. But then I started to research things like quantum physics and some of the mysteries around, the observer effect and quantum mechanics. And then I started to look at all the world's religions, and I realized that they're all kind of saying the same thing, which is that there is no physical universe. And so, that led me to the conclusion that we are most likely inside some kind of a computer simulation or a massively multiplayer video game, depending on how you look at it.
But where did that simulation come from if we are inside of it?
Well, that's the big question, right? And there's two versions of simulation theory. And, I teach a class on this at Arizona State University. It's probably the first college-level class about simulation theory, and it kind of pulls in science fiction, religion, philosophy, and technology. But one of the key distinctions I tell my students to make, because it's not talked about a lot with simulation theory, is what I call the NPC versus the RPG versions of simulation theory.
Okay.
Right. So NPC, as you probably know, means non-player characters within video games. So those are the AIs in the video game. The bartenders, the people you're beating up, the opponents, all of.
Yeah, the whole simulation technology is they go hand in hand with AI. The whole AI thing, artificial intelligence. It will get really popular. I think that's what's next to be involved with robots, right? They're continually developing them, and it takes. I was almost gonna say thousands of years, but I think maybe hundreds, maybe close to 1,000 years to just get a robot to behave almost like a human. Will we ever create something like that? I don't think so. I don't think we'll ever in the human history develop a robot that can behave exactly as a human. No, because we are organic. They're computerized, so it will never happen. But I think it'll get close. Jet says The Matrix was a good movie. Yeah, it's an amazing movie. I love The Matrix. Matrix is one of my favorite movies.
Well, that's tough. But basically, they're just code and they're AI. Then there's the RPG version, which is that we are actually doing a role-playing game, right? So you exist outside the game, and then you have a character or avatar inside the game. So it's just like what we would consider an MMORPG today, right? Except with more sophisticated technology. And so in that case, you get a little bit of a different answer than if you talk about an NPC only type of simulation, right? Because that's just running on a computer, and we're all AI in that case. Now, the two aren't mutually exclusive, right? In a video game like Fortnite or whatever, World of Warcraft, you have NPCs and you have PCs or player characters, right? So you've got both of those things going on. And so depending on how you look at it, you might come to different answers about who's outside the simulation, which would answer the question of who made the simulation, right?
Yeah.
So in the first case, you basically say that if we can get to the point where we can build these simulations, what I call the simulation point. So I call that a kind.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think that the whole Matrix. I'm glad that you brought it up. Yeah, something like that. I think they're trying to make something like the Matrix, and just being man. Imagine that. That's amazing. That is amazing. I think we are capable of doing that, but it's gonna take a long time. Yeah, the whole Matrix thing, and the Matrix has been out for years. The movie, right? That's where the idea comes from, and the only thing is that in the Matrix movie, you can actually die. So,
kind of technological singularity. Now, we've heard the term singularity mostly because of like AI and super intelligent AI, right? And AI is going to take over the world. But the guy who defined the term was actually a computer scientist who became a science fiction writer named Werner Vinge. In fact, he just passed away like a month ago or something. He was a real pioneer in like science fiction and the cyberpunk kind of subgenre or so. And so he said the singularity happens when technology increases exponentially to the point where everything will be different for humans after that point. Now, he gave like 4 different ways we could reach the singularity. Most of us talk about only one, which is AI starts to become super intelligent and it grows exponentially and everything will be different. But I think this idea of the simulation point where we can create simulations that are indistinguishable from reality. And I lay out like 10 stages in my book of all the technology we would need, including...
And I like I said, I think it's possible, but it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a long time to get everything right because, you know, the whole video game thing, I think came out, I must say, in the early 80s or something like that. Atari, right? Atari or home console. Home console came out like around early 80s, if I'm not mistaken, with the Atari. But other than that, and how long is that? That's barely been 40 years. 40 years, and this is where we're at. Well, we're actually pretty far if you really think about it. On the whole video game thing, simulation, the AI, virtual reality, and stuff like that. So,
brain-computer interfaces, like in the Matrix, right? So
or Neuralink.
Or Neuralink, right? We're getting there, right?
We're very close.
We're at the beginning of that whole phase. And so that's stage 8, stage 7 and stage 8 on the way to the simulation point. And, you know, being able to read, but also then being able to write memories as well.
No.
And then so the definition of the simulation point is being able to create a virtual reality that is indistinguishable from physical reality with AI characters that are indistinguishable from biological characters. So, you know, you wouldn't be able to tell you're talking to an NPC, basically.
Right.
We're getting closer to that already, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's like companies out there doing smart NPCs now inside video games.
Right, but what would be the difference between looking at what is possible in the future and making either a hypothesis or suggesting that has already taken place?
Right, so that's kind of the leap, right, that you need to make, which is to say that if we can do it, now let's imagine a civilization that was 1,000,000 years ahead of us, 1,000 years ahead of us.
Yeah.
Even 200 years ahead of us, right? But certainly 1,000 years ahead of us. So where will computers be in 1,000 years? They would already have created these types of simulations.
Right.
Right, because if we can do it, now 50 years ago, we didn't know if we could do it. We didn't know if computers could get to that point. Right? Today, we're pretty sure we can get there. In fact, I'd say that I'm 70% sure that we will get to the simulation point, which means I think there's a 70% chance we're living inside a simulation.
Yeah, and they're going to have to utilize what Elon Musk is using, going into the brain cell or something like that, yep. In order to experience a simulation video game to that level of reality, you would have to go and hinder the brain function. Crazy. Jet says, if time travel is real, how would we know? Right? True. Hey, somebody will be exposed. And I bet you you can find somebody on the internet that claims to be a time traveler. I bet you. We have everything. You can find anything on the internet. But that person is false.
And so the point is, if they already got there, they created a whole bunch of simulations. Okay? And you can't tell the difference whether you're in the real world or a simulated world. Right? So there's 99 of these. There's one of these. But you can't tell the difference. So which one are you more likely in? Just statistically speaking now, we're not even, projecting the technology forward. We're just saying it's more likely you're in one of the 99 than the one because there's so many more of these, right?
It's sort of.
If you can't tell the difference.
If you can't tell the difference. But there's so many things you have to think about, right? There's so many things you have to take into consideration. One of them is we don't have a straight linear line from the moment that we're born to the moment that we exist in currently. The reason being is that we go to sleep every night.
Right.
It's a weird thing. We shut off every night. And we wake up intermittently, and you go back to bed. Maybe you have to pee. Maybe you're thirsty. You go back to bed. And then you wake up again. But when you wake up, you are just waking up. Like when I woke up this morning, I don't know if this is the life I've always lived.
Right.
I'm assuming it is because I have all these detailed memories of the past. I see my dog.
Joe Rogan has been he's been into this whole I thought he paused it. Dang it. He's too much into this whole virtual reality thing, the whole neural link. He's been talking to Elon Musk too much. Should react to time travel videos, right? You only know you're asleep when you're awake. Yeah. Here's the thing with all this. If you continue in this kind of mentality, trying to figure out how things work, you're not gonna figure out all these little things that sometimes it's just incredible things that nobody has really figured out, and why? Because we are human, right? We are human, and we fall short of knowing that.
He reacts the exact same way he always does. I see my wife, I see my kids, I see my house. It's the same house that I remember, but I'm not sure. I just woke up.
Right.
I'm a little foggy already.
It just exists in your memory at that point.
It just exists in your memory.
And so
this might be the first day of my life.
Right. Suppose that you can implant false memories, right?
Right.
So this was a popular topic for Philip K. Dick, right?
Yes.
Movies like Total Recall, and even in Blade Runner, right? I interviewed his wife while I was researching, my book.
These guys, that's the thing. These are all movies. They're all movies. They're just and somebody's imagination, right? So they use the Matrix already. That's one of them. Is it possible? I think it's possible. They're using now the Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's a movie as well where he visits Mars, whatever. How do we know we're human? We could be robots without knowing. If you want to call this a robot, then it's a robot. But this robot has feelings. It has, it can dream. It can do many things that what we know to be a robot cannot do. So there you go. Case closed.
He was a wild boy.
He was an interesting guy, right?
Yeah.
And he said some interesting things. In fact, all the way back in 1977 in Metz, France, at a sci-fi convention, he said, there's a pretty famous quote. He said, "We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is if some variable is changed, some alteration occurs in our reality." Right? And that's become kind of a famous quote in the simulation world. But if you listen to the rest of the quote, he says, well, we would basically rerun the same events and we would change some variables, right? And we would have a sense of deja vu, like maybe we've already done this, right? Maybe I've, talked to you before,
right? In
a different run of the simulation, right? And this idea, like after I wrote my first book on this topic, the simulation hypothesis, this idea wouldn't leave me that, well, if you can run one simulation, you can certainly run it multiple times. In fact, that's what we would do, right? If we were running a simulation of the weather,
beds are
we wouldn't just run it
wireless
once.
chargers.
We would run it.
Beds are just wireless chargers for humans. Yeah. I love my sleep. And that's just how, that's how God created us, is for us to repair. That's the sleep is meant to repair from whatever breakdown of muscle fiber tissue you ended up doing. You depleted maybe your energy source throughout the day, hunting, gathering, running from predators and stuff like that. So that sleep will replenish you, and then you will be ready for the next day. It's a beautiful process. But yeah, that sleep is there for a reason. That's how the body is made. The body is organic. That's the thing. It's alive. It's a living, a big old living organism that needs repairment because of exhaustion, because maybe you know, you get injured. You can get injured. Sleep will help you repair that as well, right? So on and so on. That's what I think. Yeah, but it's a trip how, like, Joe Rogan has interesting people here. Like, he has people from every type of walk of life, every single kind, like scientists, religious people, video game developers, fitness gurus, comedians. Oh man, movie actors. He mostly has comedians though. I've always, because he's a comedian himself. In UFC stuff, right? Because he's one of the main UFC announcers. So, yeah. And like I said, it's interesting how he has this guy like random. I've never heard of him. I never heard of him, but all the people that he brings on the show though have something that we can all learn from. I'm gonna be the first one to admit though, there's some people that he brings on and I actually lose brain cells. Some of these talks can be cringe, for the lack of better words. Dang it. What do you think? How's the workout been? The workouts are excellent. I'm running 7 miles before my 30. Well, I do 3 miles in the morning and then 4 miles in like around 10, and then I do a 30-minute workout. Elon Musk smoking on there too. Yeah, Elon Musk was on there smoking weed
multiple times, and if we were doing simulation of whatever, right, pandemic, anything, name it, we would change the variables and we would go forward. And so, when I interviewed Tessa, Philip K. Dick's last wife, she said that he came to believe this was really happening, right? That someone was altering with our reality and they would change a few variables and rerun the simulation forward. So now we're getting pretty deep in the rabbit hole. So this is the topic of my second book, which is called The Simulated Multiverse. This idea that each of these timelines could be like a different run of the simulation itself. So that gets a little weird at that point, right? Because now we're saying that time isn't the same thing, right, that we think it is. So with the simulation hypothesis, we're saying that.
And that's the thing that I think everybody on here, the ones that come on here more serious, like if you watch when he brings on a comedian, it's not as serious as this, talking about the whole simulation and going into a rabbit hole on the whole, if is this life real or not. And he sometimes he'll bring some comedians, and they're actually pretty funny. Not all of them though. There's some that are just way out of line. They're just habitual perverts, basically. But anyways, but a lot of them are pretty smart that he brings on here. Smart in their own field, because one thing that I think about is like, okay, this person is he's a genius in his field, but let's test him out over here with some common sense, and let's see what happens. Let's make an experiment. Let's see how much of a genius he is when it comes down to common sense, right? They be doing some dumb stuff and you're like, I thought you were smart. Well, he's book smart, but he doesn't have no common sense smart. I'm trying to get out of this thing. Look at this. Look at this. Oh, it's over for me. Okay. It ain't giving me what I need. Look, I'm still alive. Oh, still alive. Yeah.
Space doesn't really exist. It basically gets rendered for us like a video game. And then with this second idea, we're saying that time doesn't really exist because what you remember could have been either implanted memories or it could be a specific run of the simulation, right? So if you run it again, maybe things are slightly different the second time you run it. So Philip K. Dick came to believe that his novel, The Man in the High Castle, which was turned into a pretty cool series. I don't know if you've seen it. It was on Amazon a few years ago. But in that, in the novel and in the series, Germany and Japan won World War II. And so you see in America that's been divided. Like the East Coast is run by the Germans, the West Coast is run by the Japanese, and you see this kind of fascist type world. And so, he later came to believe that this actually happened, and somehow the simulators reran it again, and the current timeline is one that was allowed to go forward, further forward than where that one might have ended. And so he says that at some point, all these memories.
Do you think fish can see water or not like us with air? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think they can see water. Yeah. Yeah, who knows? Well, maybe somebody like a scientist might know. I've never heard of that. I watch a lot of Discovery Channel, like the whole Animal Planet. I like watching. I love watching the animals, the reactions, what they do, their how intelligent they are. Like we don't see air, so can fish not see water, and fish can not see air? Yeah. I'm thinking because that's their natural environment, so if they were to see water, then it'll always be cloudy, right? Something would always be in front of them. So I don't think so.
Memories came flooding back to him of this other timeline. He called it
number 9.
He used this Greek word. It's called an anamnesis, which means a loss of forgetfulness, right? So he said we might be able to remember these other runs of the simulation. So anyway, that gets us into this whole idea of, is the past what we think it is, right? That's, I think, the question you were asking, right? Because you're like, if I just remember X, Y, Z, is that what actually happened? Or is it just a representation of the past in the present?
Yeah.
And so when I started looking into the quantum physics side of it, I found something really weird. And we can talk about the observer effect, but this was like even weirder than that. And it was something proposed by John Wheeler, who was at Princeton with Einstein, and he was a bit younger than Niels Bohr and Einstein and all these kind of forefathers of quantum mechanics. And he came up with several things that I was talking about, but one of them is the delayed choice experiment, or the cosmic delayed choice experiment, which puts into doubt this idea of the past. And since we're talking about the past, let's go into this now, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So imagine there's something like a quasar, and that's 1 billion light years away from us, right? And the light is coming from that quasar to here, so it's going to take 1 billion years to get here because it's 1 billion light years away. And then suppose there's something in the middle, like a black hole that's in the middle, or a galaxy, something that's very gravitationally big. And so suppose the light has to go to the left or to the right of that object. And suppose that object is like 1 million light years away from us. So it's a lot closer, but it's still 1 million light years away. So the decision about when the light goes to the left or to the right would have to be made when, right? It would have to be made in the past, about 1 million years ago, because it takes light from that, let's say it's a black hole. It's 1 million light years away, so it takes 1 million years for the light to reach Earth. And we can measure whether it went to the left or to the right. Well, it turns out that decision is in the past, as we think of it, but what the delayed choice experiment tells us is that that decision is made now when we measure that light. When the little telescopes, suppose we have 2 telescopes. One picks up on the left, one picks up on the right. And it's when we do the measurement, and until we do that measurement, both of those possibilities still exist. So we have these 2 possible pasts. 1 million years ago, right? The light went to the left or to the right. But which one happened isn't decided until the measurement is done today. So this is like Schrodinger's cat on steroids, right?
I'm not sure I totally understand this. Like,
Okay.
Why is the decision?
Just like he's like, yeah, you lost me like 10 minutes ago. I was the same way. I think because you lose interest. You lose interest because it's just too much. The only way that you're gonna be able to understand all that is if you study that religiously, right? All that quantum physics and knowing how the brain works and all that gibberish that I heard from this guy is like, all right, you lost me like 10 minutes ago. Ciao. Oh, man.
Made when you measure it.
Well, that's what the experiment, kind of showed with quantum mechanics. Just like, okay, let's start with Schrodinger's cat.
Jet says, what did that dude say? Yeah, that's what we're. Yeah, he's way ahead. He's time traveled right now. He's like 10 minutes ahead from us. We're still over here in the past. He literally time traveled right now. We're trying to catch him. We're trying to catch his train of thought. Dang. That was a good laugh. Yeah, it's just it's insane, this whole thing. Something like that, quantum physics and stuff like that. You have to really be into that. Like, it's rare to find people that are into that quantum physics stuff, physics and all that. It's rare because, like, for what? It just, like I said, it's rare for someone that it intrigues them, like trying to figure out what is present, what is past, what is future, what is time, so on and so on. Because Joe said, yeah, I wake up and I don't even know if I'm in the same life that I was before I went to bed. I think it is. You know what? That guy's high. I forget that they be smoking some joints in this show right here. Jet says, I'm sick and tired of smart people. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So, but it's still, what he's saying does not amaze me. What amazes me is that he is into what he's saying. That's what amazes me. Like, why? And he wrote like 100 books on this or something. He just keeps writing them. He probably is like, oh man, I messed that one other up. Let me write another one to correct everything I said on the previous book. So this one's good. And then later on he learned something. Oh man, I really messed that one up. Let me write another one and correct. Every book has a correction from the previous book.
Okay. It's a simpler version. So Schrodinger's cat is this experiment where there's a cat in a box, theoretical experiment. Nobody's killing any cats. And there's some poison in there. And there's some radioactive material that has a 50% chance of setting off the poison. And a 50% chance that it won't. Let's say after an hour or so. And so after an hour, the chances that the cat is dead or alive is 50%, right? Because it's a 50% chance. But what the observer effect and what quantum mechanics is telling us is that both of those possibilities exist. The cat is both alive and dead until somebody looks at that box, right? The observer in this case. And so until then, the cat is in the state of superposition. Okay. And this is what makes quantum mechanics so weird, right? This is why, Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize winner, said nobody understands
right.
quantum mechanics. And Niels Bohr said, if you're not shocked by this, then you haven't understood it. Okay. Because to us, the cat has to be alive or it has to be dead.
And we don't know until we see.
We don't know until we see, but it's only one. And common sense tells us it's one of those, right?
Right.
But quantum mechanics, through the double slit experiment and the observer effect, says both of those possibilities exist in the present until the time when someone looks. And and someone measures that result. So then we say the superposition, which is 2 states, comes down to 1 state. So the cat is both alive and dead, and then when somebody measures it, it's either alive or dead, and we're in one of those states, right? Okay.
Right.
So,
I kind of understand what you're saying, but isn't it really just that we don't know until we open the box? And it's not that the cat is both alive and dead. The cat is either alive or dead. We just haven't figured it out yet until we open the box.
that's what it would seem like, right?
Right.
That would be like common
Logical.
sense, point of view, right? But
Right.
what all the physicists have been telling us now for almost 100 years, right? Going back to the 1920s when quantum mechanics first started to get formalized, is that that's not actually the case. That what happens is you have this probability wave, and that there are different probabilities of the cat being alive or dead. Now, of course, they weren't talking about cats. That
Right,
was
the cat is maybe too simplistic. It's like a placeholder. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's,
yeah. It's a way for somebody to think about this at a high level. So
Right.
Schrodinger, who was one of the founders of quantum mechanics, through his wave equation, he basically came up with this because he thought the whole idea was ridiculous. He's like, look, you can't have a cat that's both alive and dead, right?
Right.
So this is a ridiculous
get outta
experiment,
here.
except it's become the
These
way
guys are always
in
talking
which we
about
explain.
cats, dead cats, and I'm over here trying to get out of this game over here. Which one's harder?
This weird effect about quantum mechanics. Now,
And the weird effect in quantum mechanics is things can be both moving and still at the same time, which is superposition, right?
right, or they can be in 2 different states,
Right.
which could be moving and still, could be alive or dead, or they're really talking about particles. So then it
Right.
could be like left rotated or right located
Whoa.
or right rotated. So you've got all these properties, but they can be in different they can be in different states. And this is the basis for quantum computing, by the way. I mean, you've probably heard about
Yes.
new quantum computers that are coming
I
out.
have, but I totally don't understand it.
Well, so it's the same thing as Schrodinger's cat, whereas we have a bit of information, right?
Yes.
So what are the values that a bit can have? It's like 0
Mixed match.
or 1. That's it. That's like the basic unit of information. And the bit can only have one of those values, like on my iPhone
Handicap?
or my laptop. If you look down, all the way down in
Wow.
the hardware, you can look at the...
Look at the game says it has a handicap option. That is not cool. He's like, we have some handicap peeps here, so we should probably give them a option for the ones that are handicapped. Yeah, and man, I think I'm gonna be using the handicap option because this thing might kick my butt. All right. Let's do playtime. Oh, Tetris. Am I playing somebody? No. 2 players. Okay.
the registers. Like when I was at MIT, we actually built a computer in class from scratch. You'll see there's some voltage that says this is a 1 or this is a 0.
That guy's
right.
a
That's
geek.
it. All the computing, everything we're doing with video streaming, like all that stuff.
He said
comes down to
He said he built a computer from scratch. Nothing, Siri.
having a bit that can be either a 0 or a 1.
wait, what?
It has to be one or the other. It can't be both.
Right.
So
Am I playing somebody
quantum
or not?
computing has these things called qubits. Okay, Q-U-B-I-T-S, qubits. Which a qubit is like Schrodinger's cat. It doesn't just have a value of a 1 or a 0. It is in superposition. Superposition means a superset of all the positions that are possible. So how many possibilities are there in a bit? 2, right? 0 and 1.
Mm-hmm.
So a qubit is a superposition of a bit, which means it has both values, 0 and 1, until someone measures that bit. And so theoretically, that's what allows quantum computers to solve problems that grow exponentially.
get out of
that are
this.
really big. And we're still in the early stages, but if you think of an exponential growth problem, like cracking encryption, it can be done by a regular computer. You can set up your laptop to crack. It'll take like 1,000 years or something, right? Because you have to go through every single possible value. So if you have 64 bits, that's like 2 to the 64 values, which is huge. In fact, there's an old story about the Indian king and the wise man who play chess that illustrates this story of how big that number gets when you have exponential growth. So there was a king who liked to play chess, and no one wanted to play chess with him anymore because he kept winning. And finally, there's this wise man. He's like, "Please play chess with me." And the wise man says, "Okay, I'll play chess with you if I win. For the first square on the chessboard, you give me 1 grain of rice, and then the second square on the chessboard, you double that, 2 grains of rice." And you double that to 4 grains of rice and 6 grains of rice. So we're doubling in each square, right? Mm-hmm. King's like, okay, sure. No big deal. There's just a bunch of rice, right? And so it turns out when the wise...
Joe Rogan's like, why? What? Can somebody tell me why he brought this guy on here? Like, did he sneak in from the back? Like, did we even... Is this even a guest? Did he sneak in here? Who is this? He lost me half an hour ago.
Man won. By the time you get to 2 to the 64, because there's 64 squares on the chessboard, that basically it was more rice than would fit in all of India, right? That's an exponential problem. It just grows so fast.
That's why they don't show Joe's face, because he's like, he's probably like this. Did you hear him right? He's like, Just shut up. Just shut up. Stop talking about the... Are you still talking about the cat? Is he still talking about the cat? No, right? Joe's like... Oh, snap.
And the reason it grows is there are too many possibilities, right? But now this new thing called a qubit's coming along. And the qubit has both possibilities at the same time. So if you have 64 bits and you take all the possible values of those 64 bits, you've got the same number of possibilities as the grains of rice we talked about. It's 2 to the 64. It's a very big number. It's 18 quintillion, right, is the number. There's a game called No Man's Sky. I don't know if you ever played it.
No.
Did he just yawn? There he is. I don't think he's all there. I don't think Joe's like, dang, this one's hard. Like, I shouldn't have smoked that much. Maybe I just smoked one too many joints because I'm blown. I'm blown away. I don't even know what is going on here. Is this reality?
So it became famous because it was one of the first games to have an almost infinite number of planets.
Is this the game where it just creates a universe?
Yeah,
it's kind of boring, I heard.
Yeah, it was kind of boring at first. I mean, I haven't played it in a while.
Boring.
I just kind of looked at it, but it procedurally generates everything for you. Because there's no way a team of, like, I was in the video game industry, right? There's no way a team could create 18 quintillion worlds. And it turns out that's exactly the number of worlds they have in that game, because that is, 64 bits. That's the biggest number you can get if you use 64 bits. Right?
All right.
Okay, so come back to exponential.
Right. This is comedy, right? I don't know about you, but this is comedy right here. Joe's like, he's it's going in one ear and out the other, and in the middle of that, he's just continually thinking, going in circles. How did this guy get in here? How did he get in here? What happened? For sure I'm gonna lose viewers, subscribers. Oh, it's over. This guy just does not shut up. Can I say something? Joe hasn't said a word. He just said, right. This is hilarious. I love it. I love this type of dry humor.
And that's exponential growth. It's
Okay.
just too big. And so with a quantum computer, theoretically, and these are pretty new right now, right? Amazon has one, Microsoft has one, IBM has one that you can actually program online. Google has their own. Everyone's trying to figure out how to make these qubits stable and work. But the basic idea, and I don't know what number we're up to. For a while, it was like you could only have 4 bits, qubits. Kind of like going back to the old, when we were young, the Apple II or whatever came out, and before that there were these small 8-bit processor-based kits that people would assemble, and they just couldn't have a lot of data because they just couldn't keep track of that many bits, and that's where quantum computers are today. But the idea is if you can have 64 qubits, you can instantaneously solve a problem that is exponential because you can explore all of those at the same time, and then when you measure the result, it's all now. Nobody knows exactly how this works, but the two explanations. Okay, coming back. Sorry, I know I'm kind of wondering a bit. Coming back to Schrodinger's cat, we say there's 2 possibilities, right? So with 64 qubits, there's 2 to the 64 possibilities. If they're all in superposition, they have all the possible values of it. And so basically, when you measure that, it brings it back. And so physicists call this the collapse of the probability wave. So there's a probability of all these possibilities, and then it comes down to 1. And that's sort of the best, one of the accepted ways that people think this whole thing works. But nobody totally knows. So another guy who was John Wheeler's grad student at Princeton came up with another idea. And we've heard about this idea from the superhero movies, right? And this is the multiverse idea.
Shut up.
And so basically, he said that if you've got Schrodinger's cat, what happens is you're splitting the universe into 2 different universes. In one of them, the cat is alive. And in another one, the cat is dead, right? So that's the multiverse.
Again about the cat? I thought we were done with that. I think we solved the case. We figured it out. If you look at it and it's dead, it's dead. If you haven't looked at it, it might be alive. You still don't know. We covered that. It's done. Case closed.
Idea is that when we measure it, we only see one of those 2 because we're in this universe. But if we happen to be in this other universe, the cat would have been dead, right? The cat is alive here. And so that creates a whole series of possibilities which are being used now in superhero stories all the time. Right? You've got your different versions of Batman, your different versions of Superman.
Spider-Man, yeah.
The famous Spider-Man meme where you have like the Spider-Men all kind of pointing at each other.
Yeah.
Right? And they have the different actors. So that idea has started to catch on now. It's what I like to call, it's past the 10-year-old test, right? And the 10-year-old test is when a scientific idea gets out there so much that even 10-year-olds can kind of understand it because of superhero movies, or because like in the 1930s when they were trying to explain Superman, like how does Superman get his powers? You say, oh, he came from another planet. He came from a planet called Krypton, right? So even a 10-year-old in the 1930s could have understood that. But in the 1730s, like, you couldn't say that.
Joe's like, I'm like 50-something and I don't understand. Are you saying that I'm dumb? Even a 10-year-old understands this. Wait, what? Joe wrong. Listen to Joe, okay? Joe, all he's doing, he's like, I think he smoked 1 too many joints, and all his only answer from now on. First of all, he's behind already. He's behind in the past. This guy's in the future. Joe's trying to figure out how he broke in, how he ended up on the show. And his only answer is,
Wouldn't know what the heck you're talking about, right?
Right.
And so that idea kind of diffused through society. And so that's happening now with the multiverse idea too. It's kind of diffusing, through society in this way, through popular culture, and media narratives and stuff. So that's the other explanation for how all this quantum weirdness works, which is it's the multiverse. And so people said, how can a quantum computer theoretically solve a problem that would take thousands of years for a regular computer to solve. And one explanation, a guy named David Deutsch out at Oxford says, well, because it's looking at all the possible values of the bits, there's that many different universes, right? And it's computing in all of those universes instantaneously. And then it's bringing back the value that you want at the end. And that becomes your answer. So I think we've gotten a little bit away from the original question.
It seems like that's inevitable with the subject.
Yeah, this subject does tend to take you down, many different rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And I think your original question was about memory, right? And how do we know that the memory? So the reason I went down this rabbit hole on the quantum physics stuff and the multiverse, which, by the way, that's the subject of I wrote a whole second book on simulation theory just for that, which is the simulated multiverse. Because the reason scientists like this multiverse idea is that mathematically you can figure out how the equations work in all these different worlds, whereas with the first idea, which is the Copenhagen interpretation, you have all these possibilities, you have a probability wave, and then suddenly you're down to one, and nobody can explain that mathematically. Nobody can say, how does the collapse occur? Like there's no little equation you can pop into. And so that's why it's called the observer effect, and it's considered a big mystery. Like, is it the act of observation? Is it the act of measurement? Right? So all these physicists are debating with each other, right?
Right.
So they don't like the Copenhagen interpretation because it seems to rely on consciousness or some kind of an observer, and scientists kind of hate that, right?
Right.
They hate to talk about consciousness being real, and we'll get into the whole religious aspects of the simulation hypothesis in a little bit. So they're like, well, this one's nice because the mathematics all work, the multiverse idea.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with the multiverse idea is that it's not what scientists like to call parsimonious, which means that what's happening is there's a new universe splitting off like all the time, right? Every time there's a quantum, and we're talking about quantum decisions, right? We're not really talking about big things like cats. We're talking about little decisions that occur within a nanosecond, right?
Right.
And so every time there's a decision, you're splitting off to a new physical universe. So think about, now we're talking exponential growth, but on steroids, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just infinite. It just keeps going, right? And that's kind of a weird concept, that there would be so many physical universes being created. And so, where I came out on this subject is, well, guess what? The simulation hypothesis gives you a way to look at both of these, a framework that makes it make sense, right? I mean, this is what people say when they look at quantum mechanics. They say, make it make sense, right?
Right.
Because the cat should be alive or dead. How can it be both, right? And so when you think of information and you think of the simulation idea, the core of it is that the world is not physical, okay? This table seems pretty physical, right?
Right.
But if you go and you look inside, it's mostly empty space, something like 90-some%, maybe 99%. And then you go to the atoms, and you look inside those, and it's mostly empty space, right? And there's these electron clouds and stuff, but except for the nucleus, it's mostly empty space. And the problem is, like these Russian dolls, if you keep looking inside, they keep looking for this thing called physical matter, and they can't find it. Like it's.
I just keep laughing at Joe. Joe's like, this is the least I've ever heard him speak. I think one was yesterday or the day before, we did one of these live streams, and we were listening to Joe Rogan and Sebastian. And man, listen to him. He's like blah 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 blah. Sometimes Sebastian didn't even have a word to say. Like, he was spewing. And now he's like, I don't get it.
It's not really there. It's like you go to the very smallest of the Russian dolls, and the only thing they can find is information. And so John Wheeler, who I talked about earlier, he plays an outsized role in at least my explorations of simulation theory. He came up with a phrase, and his phrase was, it from bit. So if there's something that's an it, physical object like this cup or this table, that if you just keep looking down, you have a microscope that just keeps going down. He goes, in the end, the only thing you find are particles. But what the heck are particles? And he said, well, the only thing that particles really are is a series of answers to yes, no questions. So it's like, does the particle spin up? Does it spin down? It's got like, various different polarities and things. But so he said, in the end, the only thing you have are bits of information, because that's a bit, right? Every single decision is a bit, yes or no, 1 or 0. That's like the fundamental unit of computation. And that's how we, like I said, stream video, everything else. And so he said, everything that's in it is actually from bits of information. And there's a whole new kind of field within physics, which is called digital physics, right? So in the past, physics was about physical objects moving around. And so digital physics is about information, like what happens to information in the universe. Does it get destroyed in a black hole? Does it get created? So you have, instead of conservation of momentum and, conservation of energy, you have conservation of information. So it's like a different way of looking at the physical world. And you look at it as a computation rather than looking at it as physical objects moving around, like in classical physics.
Right.
Yeah.
The problem is, like, we do live in a physical world as far as we can tell. But then if you measure the actual things in the physical world, then you get to this weirdness.
Right, exactly. You get to this weirdness down at the bottom level.
He doesn't even know what he just said. It sounded smart. But I heard it way more confused. A highly confused human being. That's what I just witnessed right now. Not smart.
The core of it all, like what is going on as far as we can measure.
Right, and there's a limit. Like we can only measure up to the smallest unit,
right,
which is called like the Planck.
But as we go deeper, we get less answers, and it gets more weird.
It gets more weird, and it starts to look less like the physical world exists and more like it's a bunch of information that gets rendered as we observe the world, or as groups of people observe the world. Right?
Have you ever taken this back as far as you can and like try to figure out like what created this? Or what possibilities could have created this? Or was there ever a physical world?
Well, that's a good question. So where I ended up with this was looking at how the world gets rendered as you observe it. Like for me, my background is, as I said, a computer scientist and a video game designer and developer. That's pretty much how we render video games, right? Mm-hmm. So if you and I are our avatars are in the same field or the same room, about to shoot each other in a video game, we're not really in the same room, are we?
Right.
You're rendering it on your screen, and I'm rendering it on my screen.
Right.
Right? And so there's information that's coming from the server, and then what happens is we render only the part that we can see, right? Only that view around your avatar. You could be first-person point of view, or you could be like kind of hovering over your character, or like many video games do that these days, like a kind of a third-person or second-person point of view. But the only pixels you need to render on my computer are the ones that my avatar.
This is how he looks like, just to kind of give you a quick preview of how he looks like, because he's been talking for the past full hour by himself. I don't think Joe was ever there. I think he was there. He was there physically. The first 5 minutes. After that, yeah, who knows? Who knows where he's at right now? So he's lost. Hopefully, he found his way back into reality. We can only hope and speculate. But other than that, there you have it right there. I'm going to leave the live stream there. Hope you can join me here. I'll come on here randomly, so be sure you are subscribed. Come and join me in. Let's have a conversation. What do you think about these topics, these conversations? I want to know. Let me know. Be looking out for my new reaction video coming out. My new fitness vlog coming out. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button before you leave this video. and I'll see you on the next one.